This isn't a scandal headline. This isn't another tabloid rumor. What Tom Bower has just released is being described by people close to the story as something very different. An exposure built on timelines, missing procedures, and private conversations that were never supposed to leave closed rooms. Because suddenly, details that were once dismissed as noise are lining up. Dates, movements, gaps, and names that were never part of the public narrative are now being whispered in the same sentence. By the end of this video, you'll understand why paternity questions, sealed birth records, and a mysterious Colombia connection are now being discussed together, and why, according to multiple reports, this has sent Prince Harry into a private downward spiral no statement has been able to stop. This is not about gossip. It's about patterns. And when patterns start matching behind the scenes, stories don't fade. They evolve. And once the door opens, it doesn't quietly close again. According to multiple people familiar with what followed Bower's release, the first reaction behind the scenes wasn't calm. It wasn't dismissal. And it definitely wasn't a simple denial. What's being described instead is escalation, not quiet confidence, not a single clear piece of evidence put forward to shut the conversation down, but anger, panic, frantic calls, legal pressure, demands for retractions before most of the public had even fully processed what was being suggested. And that response is exactly what shifted this from a story people would normally scroll past into something people started leaning toward. Because certainty doesn't behave like that. Certainty doesn't slam doors. It doesn't threaten everyone in the room. It doesn't try to smother a question before it's even finished being asked. Certainty presents proof. And this is where many observers say the situation took its sharpest turn. Because if these implications were completely baseless, there was one move that would have ended everything instantly. One simple, final verification. A single action that would have shut down every headline, every theory, every conversation. And yet, that action never came. Not publicly, not quietly, not even through an anonymous leak. Instead, there was only noise. And sometimes, noise is what fills the space when something very solid is missing. This is where the conversation stopped being about reactions and started being about records. Because what Tom Bower reportedly pointed toward wasn't a dramatic claim. It was something colder, something far more uncomfortable. Procedure. According to his work, the circumstances surrounding Archie's birth didn't follow the patterns the royal family has relied on for generations. Not opinion, not emotion. Comparison. No clearly identified medical team. No traditional confirmation. No familiar documentation trail the public had been shown countless times before. Instead, there were carefully controlled appearances, limited details, statements that felt managed rather than transparent. On their own, none of these things would mean much. Every single one could be explained. Every single one could be defended. But stacked together, they created what investigators call a deviation. And in institutions built on ritual and repetition, deviation is never invisible. Bower didn't present this as proof. He presented it as misalignment. And misalignment is where questions begin to survive. Because the monarchy doesn't function on mystery. It functions on process. When the process breaks, the silence around it grows louder than any accusation. And according to multiple accounts, this was the point where the tension stopped being public and became personal. According to people familiar with the situation, this was the point where the story stopped living only in articles and comment sections and started living inside the marriage. Because what followed, they say, wasn't a public meltdown. It was something quieter, more dangerous. Questions. Not the kind asked for cameras, the kind asked behind closed doors. Why were certain details handled this way? Why were timelines so tightly controlled? Why did everything surrounding the birth feel so insulated from outside confirmation? Those are not accusations, those are doubts. And doubt doesn't need evidence to exist, it only needs inconsistency. Multiple reports suggest Harry became increasingly fixated on the sequence of events, on dates, on movements, on who knew what and when. Not because he wanted a story, but because once a question lodges itself in a man's mind, it doesn't leave politely, it waits. And according to this account, at some point the unspoken finally crossed into language. Not in public, not to friends, but privately, a request. Not framed as a threat, not framed as an ultimatum. Framed as a way to make the noise stop. Because there is only one kind of action that ends speculation instantly. And when that action isn't taken, people don't hear reassurance. They hear avoidance. And from there, the story stopped being about headlines and became about what happens when certainty disappears inside a relationship. This is where the story reportedly stops being contained within palaces, hospitals, and press offices and starts pointing somewhere no one expected, outside the UK. According to Tom Bower's research, and the people now dissecting it, one location keeps resurfacing in timelines that were never meant to overlap: Colombia. Not as a headline destination, not as a publicized chapter, but as a recurring background presence. Travel windows that didn't line up cleanly, private movements that were never fully explained, gaps where public appearances stopped and records became vague. On their own, each instance could be dismissed. A delayed flight, a rescheduled visit, a charity engagement that didn't make the news cycle. But when independent researchers began stacking those moments against other events, announcements, absences, sudden shifts in narrative, something uncomfortable emerged: consistency. Not proof, but repetition. And repetition is what turns coincidence into a trail. According to these accounts, every time this location quietly reappeared, it coincided with periods when details became unusually guarded, when explanations narrowed, when verification became harder instead of easier. And that's why this element has unsettled so many people. Not because of what it claims, but because of how often it refuses to go away. Because real investigations rarely hinge on one dramatic moment. They build on patterns. And this was the point where many watching this unfold realized the story was no longer centered on a single book. It was expanding. According to people tracking how this story evolved, what happened next is what always changes the scale of a situation. The internet noticed. Not tabloids, not talk shows. Independent users. People who don't publish headlines. They publish timestamps. Archived posts were pulled, old travel photos resurfaced, deleted pages were cached, videos were slowed down, frames compared, backgrounds analyzed. What had once been scattered suddenly started being organized. And that's when the conversation reportedly shifted from, "Is this ridiculous?" to, "Why do these things keep lining up?" Accounts began sharing side-by-side timelines. Public appearances next to private gaps, announcements next to unexplained absences. Every thread alone meant nothing. Together, they formed something harder to dismiss. Then came the moment that accelerated everything. An anonymous account appeared. No history, no followers. One post. According to screenshots that circulated before it vanished, the image showed a luxury hotel corridor, soft lighting, private setting, and a figure widely believed to be Meghan Markle standing close to a man who was not Prince Harry. No performance, no staged pose, a candid moment. The account disappeared quickly, but the image didn't, because deletion doesn't erase screenshots. And from that point forward, the story didn't need promotion. It had momentum. People began comparing body frames, matching jewelry, analyzing backgrounds. Whether accurate or not, the discussion had crossed into something far more difficult to control. And once a narrative reaches that stage, silence no longer calms it. It amplifies it. According to multiple observers, this was the point where the story stopped being driven only by anonymous posts and online threads and started colliding with real people from Meghan's past. Because one name kept resurfacing quietly in the background: Trevor Engelson, the man who knew her before the cameras, before the titles, before the palace walls. He hadn't been part of the public narrative for years. He hadn't done interviews, he hadn't responded to documentaries, books, or headlines. And that absence had always made him invisible. Until suddenly, people close to him suggested he was willing to talk. Not publicly, not for headlines, but privately. And what he reportedly described wasn't scandal, it wasn't accusation, it was atmosphere, a shift. According to this account, he spoke about a period where ambition replaced openness, where international contacts multiplied, where explanations became shorter and secrecy became normal. He didn't frame it as betrayal. He framed it as transformation. Then he described a memory that had stayed with him: a hotel, a hallway, a door closing, a man exiting a room who wasn't supposed to be there. Not panicked, not hiding, comfortable. And what unsettled him most, according to this telling, wasn't the man, it was the response. Not denial, not fear, but reframing, networking, opportunity. a world he wouldn't understand. And when he later saw Columbia referenced again years later in a completely different chapter of her life, he reportedly said the feeling returned. Not proof, not certainty, recognition. And recognition is powerful because it doesn't tell people what to believe. It makes them start rereading the past. According to people who claim familiarity with the situation, this was the phase where the story stopped being something happening out there and started being something happening inside the relationship. Not arguments for the public, not statements for the press. Private unease. Multiple accounts describe a shift in Prince Harry's behavior during this period. More withdrawn, more reactive, more consumed by what he was reading, watching, and hearing. Not because of the headlines themselves, but because of the timelines behind them. Dates, sequences. Why certain moments were handled the way they were. And again, this wasn't described as accusation. It was described as fixation, the kind that comes when a question enters your head and refuses to stay hypothetical. According to this telling, at some point the conversation stopped circling the issue and finally named it. Not in public, not in front of anyone else. A request for clarity, not framed as confrontation, framed as a way to end the noise. Because there is only one kind of action that truly ends speculation. And people close to the situation claim that when this possibility was raised, the atmosphere changed. Not relief, not reassurance, but tension. And tension is often what appears when an issue stops being abstract and becomes personal. From there, those watching say the situation became less about outside narratives and more about what happens inside a marriage when certainty starts to erode. By this point, people watching this unfold say the conversation had changed. It was no longer, "Is this true?" It had quietly shifted to, "Why hasn't this been ended?" Because in situations like this, narratives usually die one of two ways. They collapse under evidence, or they suffocate from silence. And here, there was a noticeable absence of the one thing that normally resolves everything. Not statements, not lawsuits, not condemnations, verification. According to observers, that absence is what allowed the story to grow beyond any single book, account, or screenshot. It created a vacuum, and vacuums don't stay empty. They pull in speculation, interpretation, and fear. Commentary channels multiplied. Long-form breakdowns appeared. Former staffers, distant contacts, and unnamed sources began hinting at unusual procedures and unprecedented meetings. None of it confirmed, all of it corrosive. And through it all, official responses remained minimal. Controlled, carefully worded, non-specific, which to many people following this didn't calm anything, it sharpened it. Because silence can mean dignity, but it can also mean strategy. And when the public can't tell which one it is, trust erodes. According to those tracking the reaction, this was when the story crossed its final threshold. It stopped being something that could be laughed off. It stopped being something that could be ignored. It became something waiting for one simple thing that could end it in seconds, or transform it forever. At this stage, people following this situation say something important has happened. The story stopped being about any single claim. It became about something much bigger: how narratives are built, how doubt spreads, and how in the modern internet age, silence doesn't make stories disappear, it transforms them. Because when information is fragmented, people don't wait for answers, they assemble them. Screenshots become evidence. Timelines become theories. Absence becomes meaning. And suddenly, a book release isn't just a book anymore, it's a spark. What followed, according to media analysts, wasn't an investigation. It was a collision between public curiosity and institutional privacy, between a demand for clarity and a system built on controlled disclosure. This is the part most people miss. The power of a story like this isn't whether it's right or wrong, it's what happens when uncertainty goes unanswered. Because once doubt takes root, facts struggle to compete with feelings, and feelings spread faster than verification ever could. Right now, what the world is watching isn't proof, it's pressure. Pressure on public figures, pressure on institutions, pressure on narratives that were once carefully managed. And the longer that pressure sits without resolution, the more people stop asking what's true and start asking why hasn't this ended. That shift is the real story. Not scandal, not rumor, but the way modern attention turns unanswered questions into permanent noise. Whatever the truth is, And only real confirmation ever decides that. This moment will be remembered as the point where control over the narrative was lost. And in today's world, once that happens, there is no reset button, only escalation or clarity. And the public is waiting to see which one comes first.